primarily going to talk about crowdfunding for social initiatives, crowdfunding for social enterprises, entrepreneurs. That's the space in which BitGiving started out. So um, I'll give a bit of a background on myself and on BitGiving before I actually go into the presentation. Like Dan mentioned, there is a personal story behind why I started out with BitGiving in 2013 and why I conceptualized it. I was fresh out of college. I'm a filmmaker, so I could have been one of the people crowdfunding on Wishberry. Working in advertising when I came up with my first entrepreneurial idea, which was all artists all over India didn't have a platform to actually connect with each other. And I could see it because I was shooting all over India, and every time I had to pick up my crew and I had to go to the other city. Very simple idea. I wasn't a technology person back then, so I tried building it up. Got a couple of people interested, got a team together, we started working on it. And then I saw the black side of entrepreneurship, when nobody's ready to put funds into what you're planning to do. If crowdfunding was that great in India or had started out in India at that point, I think I could have gone up to those artists and said, this is what I'm planning to do, and got them to crowdfund what the platform that I was trying to create. And I know that because every person I spoke to, and they still reach out to me now, keep on asking me why. And I'm like, because, I just couldn't. Somehow, I ended up meeting my co-founder. We were running a technology company together somehow. And we came up with the idea of BitGiving, and we built BitGiving as a crowdfunding platform for everything initially. The premise with which we started out with BitGiving, and I know a lot of people over here might connect with it, was to create a product which had our strengths, which was technology. So everything in BitGiving goes back to how can we make it easier for a campaigner or for a contributor to be able to raise money. We started out with, one of our first campaigns was a social campaign, and we started out with a campaign with Amnesty International India, which raised $1 lakh in 5 days. And from there, we've been working with different organizations, different smaller organizations, groups of people who want to do social change, and trying to help them by taking away that one factor that normally hinders them, like it did back in the day with me, which was funds. So social initiatives. Anybody is going to over here tell me, how do you think most of the social organizations or initiatives in India are funded? Anybody? Grants, CSR? Donations. Okay. Yes. So the traditional fundraising, about 85% of it is grants, is CSR. Just 15% of it was donors. And that was a bit of a problem because the number of NGOs that are there in this country, some of them doing beautiful work, did not have access to the right kind of funds to be able to do what they wanted to do. And that's where BitGiving plugged in. The traditional donation strategy for most donors also was, why don't you give us money and we'll do something with it? I was just having a conversation with somebody. Do I have the next slide? So I was having a conversation with somebody right now outside, and they said, okay, I completely agree with Priyanka when they say they'll give money once, why would they come back? I was like, you're talking about a fundraising mechanism where people went in, put in $500, didn't know what happened with that 500 rupees, and then went like, okay, I did charity once. BitGiving and the crowdfunding that we mapped to the social space was a little different. The way we mapped it was, we said, okay, bigger organizations or small, what you're going to put up on our platform are very targeted initiatives. Put up your next program, put up your next product. And there's a lot that these NGOs are doing. The more I meet them, and the more I look at the kind of products that they've built within organizations. There's a lot of tangible products that they're doing. I was like, put them out there and raise funds for that. Show an impact and go back. You'd be surprised, we've seen big NGOs raise a lot of money and move completely to crowdfunding, and I'm going to come to that case study. And then we've seen smaller NGOs that nobody knew anything about, overnight raising a lot of money and getting so many supporters and a donor base and a community around what they were planning to do. So the way we look at crowdfunding is disrupting philanthropy the way it is in India today. And we don't only want to stay at donations. We want to go out to those social entrepreneurs who have a tangible product which is making social impact. And I met some brilliant ones like that, to be able to crowdfund what they're planning to do. The idea is, let's take the fear away from people to put in money in a social initiative because they don't know where the money is going. But instead, actually give them the power to understand that their 100 rupees actually made an impact and led to a social change. Traditional fundraising, mostly their target audience are older people who've had their recurring donations in place, money keeps on going, they send out a physical mailer once in a while, they'll write checks. Or there'll be certain HNIs who'll put in a lot of money. The reason why a lot of social initiatives get really excited about crowdfunding is because we are opening it up to a completely different target audience now. People who are 30 and younger. These are guys who are transacting on internet. Maybe even 40 and younger, that's our target audience, are transacting on internet. They're out there, they have the disposable income, and they want to make a social change. This is what we started out with. But what we saw in the last 1 year, and we launched in December 2013, was that there were still certain gaps that were out there, some of which we were able to fill, some of which that are still there. So, okay. So one of it was that for fundraising, not a lot of organizations had the platform or the means to create a platform which could have a targeted crowdfunding scenario. What was happening with their donor retention was that they had scattered call to actions. They were asking people to sign petitions, they were asking people to come back, they were asking people to be recurring donors. And what was happening was that even though they had thousands of people supporting them, they weren't really turning into donors. Their campaigning, their outreach was disconnected. People did not know what they were planning to do. They would do really nice campaigns, but there was absolutely no resonance as to what that organization was planning to do. And lastly, people didn't know the impact that their money was making. I'm going to keep on saying that now. Okay, so crowdfunding became a brilliant mechanism for most of these organizations because suddenly they realized that the community that they were trying to make, and most of them are now planning to make online through social media, could not only come in through crowdfunding on a financial level, but it was also becoming a brilliant tool of marketing for these guys. Raise funds for targeted initiatives and create the community around your cause. That's what we went to these guys with. In a very short way, I'm just going to talk about where we are with crowdfunding for social causes. I'm not saying we've hit home run with it. I'm going to talk about a couple of case studies which are very encouraging. But what we realized in the first year, because we're technology people, we turned around and said, we have a technology platform, let people raise money on it. And that's something that Priyanka also seconds that. Crowdfunding has a lot of potential, and I completely believe that. And all of us do, which is why we're here. But the only thing that's stopping it is that the ecosystem hasn't been able to build up in India till now. A lot of people who understand that are very, very less, which is why we went ahead from put up your campaign and raise money to we're going to campaign for you and with you. Very recently, we had this wonderful guy who was campaigning for change.org who joined us. And he's building this entire mechanism, which makes it easier for campaigners to raise money, to tell their narrative, tell their story, figure out who their target audience is, and make it slightly easier for these guys to actually execute strategies. Next slide. There's still a long way to go, and what's missing is This would have been better if I was handling it. Uh, what we need to understand is what I'm going to talk about are the case studies, but we've only scratched the surface of the possibility that crowdfunding can have today. Yeah. Okay. So this is a campaign which is very close to my heart. It is one of the first campaigns that came up on BitGiving. How many of you have heard about Stop Acid Attacks or have heard about this organization, the work that they're doing? Perfect. It makes me feel really happy to see that people actually know about them. When we got in touch with them, and this is right after we'd launched BitGiving, this was an organization, which was run by an acid attack survivor and her now fiance, who was a journalist. The idea was to bring all acid attack survivors together in India and be able to create sustainable models around what they could do. So the main woman behind the entire movement is Lakshmi, who actually did not come out of her house for 8 years before she came out and said, okay, now I'm going to do something about this. This organization had some 200 supporters, some 800 people who had signed their petition, but 200 people who actually supported them before they decided that they want to use crowdfunding to go ahead. They've actually built a sustainable model of employing all the acid attack survivors that they have in some way or the other. And that's what they started raising money for. Within 2 months, they'd raised about 13 lakhs. But that wasn't all. Their community went from 200 people to now I think there are a couple of 100,000 people who are actually supporting them at every point. It was so brilliant because after a point, Lakshmi was awarded by Michelle Obama. She's become the face of acid attack survivors. And they continue to raise money through crowdfunding because they know, like Dan said, if people are putting 100 rupees into the cause, they're putting much more. And they're actually invested in what they plan to do. This is another case study that I'm going to talk about. So initially when we started out with Amnesty International India, who are exclusive partners with us in the sense that all their online fundraising happens through BitGiving. We did a similar experiment with Magic Bus. Magic Bus India Foundation, I don't know how many people know it, is a foundation that works with kids. Based out of Mumbai and Delhi, they do a lot of beautiful work in reforming kids who are from underprivileged backgrounds. So we were in conversations with them, and there was this there was a new team which had come in, they wanted to do something different. They said, you know what, we don't want to raise money through the traditional fundraising route. Their entire platform was changed and BitGiving was plugged in. Today they only raise money for targeted initiatives. To the extent that after they were showcased and Satyamev Jayate and Amir Khan spoke about the work that they were doing, within 2 days they'd raised about 18 lakhs on the platform, which went up to much more than that because they were able to re-engage with all the people. So a little about BitGiving over here was that we've built BitGiving in such a way that if a contributor comes in once, they are always connected to the platform. There are enough re-engagement methodologies for the campaigners. And Magic Bus was one of the first people who actually used all those tools to be able to retain their contributors beyond just a simple donation. Apart from that, we've seen a lot of campaigns which have found their crowd. So these are, I spoke about bigger organizations or organizations that have become big. These are two very, very sweet campaigns which are run by really small organizations. But the stories and the impacts that they made were huge. The first one was Mamoni. The Mamoni is the name for this artist in West Bengal. Her actual name is Rupshona, but everybody ended up calling her Mamoni after this campaign. Wanted to paint a scroll so that she could be she could be a part of the national award or apply for the national award. Raise money in 2 days because people actually believed that her story was strong enough. The second one is a library in Pen Space. These are again stories which are very niche. Not a lot of people understood. But because these guys' stories went out to the right target audience, they actually ended up raising the money that otherwise they couldn't have used to be able to do what they had to do. Another very interesting thing that we saw. So a lot of fundraisers that we normally discuss with organizations, and especially bigger organizations, they started looking out for innovation. They realized that they had a lot of influencers that they wanted them to actually, who wanted to do something beyond just donating to their platform. On BitGiving, we realized that after a point, a campaigner can only push till a certain point for a particular social cause. So the organization can maybe raise 30% or 40% from the networks that they have, or that individual can raise 30 or 40%. So we opened it up saying that if your cause is strong enough, why not let other people raise money for you? We actually saw a campaign once which had 20 such sub-campaigns raising money for that particular campaign. This example that I'm showing you is actually a support event, is what we call it, a support event for Stop Acid Attacks. This guy did not know Lakshmi at all before he heard of him, got in touch with her and said, you know what, I'm going to raise money for you. He raised a lakh from his own personal networks to make sure that Lakshmi could create the home for the Stop Acid Attack team that she was rehabilitating with her. Stories like this is where crowdfunding works. It's not just the organization, it's the crowd who wants to give more than money and is able to do that because, you know what, I'm going to put in $100, I'm also going to get 25 of my friends to put in $100 to make this successful. The impact approach. So one of the points that Priyanka touched upon was, again, that a lot of people do not come back because they don't know the impact that they're making. On BitGiving, what we tell our campaigners is that if you want this community to engage with you beyond what they're engaging with you right now, impact story is what makes it the strongest community ever. So there were two stories that we have. The first one was, again, a library in Barpeta, Assam. I don't know how many of you know where that is. It's a tiny village. Again, an organization nobody knew anything about, raised money for them. Couldn't raise the entire amount. It was not a successful campaign. But they went ahead, set up the library, and made sure they communicated to their contributors. The contributors were really touched. One of them got in touch with them and said, okay, I'm quite amazed you're still doing this. He sent across books worth 1 lakh and a couple of iPads to make sure that the library was not empty. That's the power of impact. Even though people can't give money or couldn't give money at a particular point, they make sure that they go beyond what they plan to do. The second is, again, a very sweet story. This is this organization called Protsahan, wanted to raise money for one of the teachers. The impact of what it could do, it was a personal narrative. She ended up losing out on a house. She had a mortgage or house because her brother was kidnapped. She came up to Protsahan and said, can we do something about this? They raised the money in 2 days because the narrative was so strong and the impact of what people could do for it was so strong that they actually went ahead and contributed towards it. And the point is, like I was saying, the community goes much beyond crowdfunding. At the end of the day, this is a campaign that we had, which was to plant 10,000 trees in Delhi. We had some 400 people contributing. They raised around 5 lakhs. And at the end of the day, what happened was when the trees were actually being planted, the same contributors came back and participated. And this is exactly why I believe that the power of crowdfunding is beyond just raising funds for social initiatives. Because what ended up happening was, yes, they made it possible, but they also came together to make a larger impact. And this was a community that they kept on going back to for more and more that they were planning to do. And it only grows and the virality effect of it becomes much greater. That's about it. I think I lost track in the middle because I was a little distracted. But any questions, I'd be happy to answer. So one of the major things that we started out on, and it was an experiment when we launched BitGiving. If you look at the BitGiving campaigning page, there is this engagement page where we actually encourage people to talk about the campaign even if they're not contributing. Not only that, whenever somebody is contributing, we actually encourage them to talk about why they're contributing to a particular cause. The first level of engagement starts from there. What we've built into BitGiving from a very boring technology point of view is re-engagement, which is triggered at every milestone on the platform. So the idea is that the campaigner at all points, obviously, the impact needs to come from the campaigner, but the campaigner at all points is actually prompted to put impact stories out there and talk to their people. The reaching out to the people, the strategy that we built to them is built on a conversational point of view. And most of our campaigners understood that because they realized that every time they go back and comment on a particular contribution post, there was a re-engagement, there was an email going to this guy was sharing it again. And what was also happening was that contributors were more motivated because they felt that there was a personal connection, which is why crowdfunding works. If you can feel that there's a personal connection with somebody out there, which led to the virality of most of the campaigns that we had, and which was also Stop Asset Attacks. People loved the fact that Lakshmi was coming back and talking to them and saying, thank you for this. Organizations, the program heads or CRY was coming back and saying that, thank you for supporting us. Could you please spread the word with us? They had the leverage of actually questioning them, and they would come back and answer, which has also happened. So it's an open timeline for people to see what's happening. And that's something which is building up beyond what we envisioned initially, because we saw that that's where the trust factor of it comes in for a lot of people. For us, it's very important that all the contributors who come on board know that all the campaigns that are going out are vetted. By the way, we get an average of 60 to 70 campaigns a day being submitted on our platform, but I don't think more than 3 or 4 go up. That's how stringent our entire methodology of verifying them is. So there's a 2-level verification. The first verification is only organizations who registered under Section 25A, that means they're a not-for-profit organization, or they're a for-profit, but there is a verification or they're registered, are allowed to raise money for social causes. So that is the first guideline that we have over there. Whenever an organization ends up registering on our platform, we actually do a verification with them to understand that it's actually the organization. After a campaign is submitted, our campaign team actually gets in touch with them to understand who it is, their documents that are taken from the organization before a campaign goes live. Also, no campaign goes live unless and until it's tangible, there's a resonance, and the story is complete. So they're grilled by our campaign team to make sure that the story is 360-degree before it actually goes out.
So is there any post-crowdfunding verification? As in,
so we don't measure the impact. And that is something that we realized we could not do beyond a point. But what we do, like I mentioned, our re-engagement makes sure we prompt the campaigner to actually come back and share the impacts, and that happens, and they know the value of it. Also, the contributors at any point, so the campaign never dies. That's what we say in the BitGiving world. 30 days, you raise the money, but the campaign never dies. The contributors are most welcome to go back and write on that timeline saying, okay, what's happening? So they know that it's out in the open, and the impact needs to be communicated.
Hi, Ishita. If I may,
okay.
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm standing. So my name is Steve. I live in Kenya, and I started a crowdfunding platform over there. Well, thanks for your great insights, and I really commend your team for what you're doing. My question to you was, what is the ratio of contributors that support campaigns on BitGiving that are actually internationally based?
So at the moment, and this is a problem that I hope we discuss today, at the moment, for social organizations in India, there are FCRA organizations, non-FCRA organizations. FCRA organizations have a mandate from the government to take money from abroad. So at our end, that's the 3rd level of verification that happens. They have to give their documents to be able to take money from abroad. Most of the organizations haven't opted for that yet with us. Most of the crowdfunding, most of the money that is raised out of India. And now for the FCRA organizations, we're also moving international and we're making sure that's also facilitated. So that's a bigger impact if you ask me, because in India, people do not give easily. And I think we understand that. So it's been domestic.
Give warm applauses.